It was a mysterious world. This darkness is like a venomous snake that also looks at its prey, waiting for an opportunity, where the highest types of predators can often disguise themselves as the most harmless. If you don't pay attention, they'll take advantage of it. Vampires, werewolves, ghosts, cyborgs, puppets, they are everywhere in this world, even in human blood. It's home to all the most terrifying creatures imaginable. In this world, the main character is just an apprentice in an ordinary pharmacy. He must always remain calm, because if he shows even the slightest fear, the darkness will consume him. This is the very truth that he came to during 2 years of traveling around this world. During these 2 years, he only did one thing. Suddenly, a voice called out to the main character, "Hey, Linen. It's about time, go hang up the lamp outside and get ready to open the store." Linen said he was coming right now. Right after that, his eyes lit up and he saw dialogue boxes. They read, "You have received a task from your teacher Bloodsaw Maniac. Prepare for the opening of the store and hang the shower lamp on the door. Quest rewards, X10 Skull Coin, X5 Base Experience, 100 milliliters pure human blood." Linen was a little surprised to finally see the system 2 years after coming to this world. He got up from his chair and said that there was no time to deal with this, we must go and at all costs fulfill the teacher's assignment. Linen opened the door and saw a teacher who looked like a huge butcher standing in the doorway, holding someone's corpse in his hands. Linen thought that he might have died fainting if he had seen this in the past, but now he was already used to it. 2 years ago, teacher was the one who saved Linen. In return, he began to study medicine with him and help in business. This kind of life is a bit boring, but there's nothing to complain about. After all, being able to survive in this world is already considered a miracle. Linen held a match to the lamp, dripped blood, and evil spirits began to swirl around it. He went outside and hung up the lamp. A dialogue box appeared stating that you had received X10 Skull Coins, X5 Base Experience, 100 milliliters of human blood. Oh, and that's the whole quest. It was easy. Suddenly, an old woman in a black cloak turned to the main character. In her hands was a lamp made of human skin of the face. She turned to the guy and said good morning. She also asked for some garbage that is not a pity. The dialogue box appeared. Remember that scavengers are after human flesh. Your additional task, share useless garbage. Reward, scavengers favor +10, +20 skull coins, scavengers reward 1. Linen asked her to wait a bit and then thought that it would be better to get rid of her as soon as possible. Linen took out a bag with someone moving and gave it to the old woman. She thanked him. The dialogue box appears, you have received a reward. Scavenger favor +10, skull coins +20. The old woman said that Linen was very kind and gave him the reward. She put 2 fingers to her eyes and squeezed them out, then gave him her eyes. A dialogue box appears. You can choose to accept or not accept this award. If you reject it, you will receive -50 scavenger favor points. The main character smiled nervously and said that he would accept them. After that, the old woman turned around and left. A dialogue box appeared. You have received the scavenger's reward, 1 tailor's eye, 1 butcher's eye, scavenger's favor +20. The main character exhaled and walked back to the house. He said, I have heard from master in the past that there is a tailor's shop and a butcher's shop nearby. In the tailor's shop they sew from human skin, and in the butcher's shop they sell human flesh. And what scavenger just gave me is the eyes of both shopkeepers. There is one rule in this world, never dare to offend a creature from the dark. The teacher is still busy, so why not study the system? The main character calls the system window. Name, Linen, 17 years old. Level 2. Race, human. Strength, 3. Agility, 4. Intelligence, 7. Physique, 3. Basic skills. Home economics average, 900 out of 1000. Drug production initial, 2100th. Skull coins, 100. Reputation, none. Description, an unknown assistant from Bloodsaw Pharmacy. Weak, but smart and young, a human male. He has already lived in this world for 2 years, but you can never predict at what point he may die. Linen looked at the status window and thought that it looked similar to the ones found in video games. He thought that as long as he completed the tasks, his level, attributes, and abilities would increase, so the chance of survival would also increase. Suddenly, the door to the room opened. The pharmacy master was standing in the doorway with a bloody bag. He said that he would leave for a while and return in 2 days. He said, keep an eye on the pharmacy and don't forget to close the doors. Don't let any thieves steal anything. The teacher status window opens. Bloodsaw Maniac. Race, Sewing Monster. Level, Unknown. Attributes, Lawful Evil. Combat Strength, don't try to provoke him. Description, owner of Bloodsaw Pharmacy in Wandering Soul Alley, skilled in performing all types of operations. In addition to operations, he also has some interesting business. A system window with a new task appeared in front of Linen. You have received a task from your teacher Bloodsaw Maniac. Keep an eye on the store. Completion reward, 50 skull coins, 100 base experience points, 1 special reward. In this system window, a line for failing the quest also appeared. The supply storage of the pharmacy could use some more parts. Linen asked the teacher if there was anything else worth paying attention to. The teacher thought for a moment, then said, if they have money, take it. If they don't, then take something of equal value in return. And if they don't have any money and don't want to pay, then take this item and take it yourself. The teacher handed Linen the item and the item status window appeared. Bloodsaw's razor blade. Condition, excellent. Level, unknown. Owner, Bloodsaw Maniac. Description, boning knife often used by the owner of Bloodsaw Pharmacy. It's razor sharp and can cut through flesh and souls unhindered. After using this knife for a certain amount of time, you will have an overwhelming desire to cut things. Linen accepted razor blade. Uchittle takshido babble, don't forget to feed little baby after closing up the shop. My little baby has not eaten for a long time. The system window appeared. You have received a task from the teacher. Sort out expired medicine and feed little baby in the backyard. Quest completion rewards 10 skull coins minus 10 little baby's favorability plus 1 housekeeping. Finally, the teacher turned around and said that no matter what sounds you hear outside, you can't leave the range of the soul lamp. Even if someone asks for help, ignore it. Don't forget to close your doors and windows at night. No matter who calls you, be quiet. If anyone comes in, kill them. The teacher left the building. Linen scratched his head and thought that the next 2 days would be terrible. After that, Linen, along with the knife that the teacher gave him, sat at the table and listened to the ticking of the clock. At one point, the clock rang and someone knocked on the door. Outside the door, they asked if the pharmacy owner was still there. Linen looked through the door peephole and saw the system window. You have received a task from Blood Puppet. Treat the injured doll. Completion reward, plus 50 skull coins, plus 50 surgical ability experience points, and 1 special reward. A small girl in a skirt was standing outside the door with a doll. They were smeared with blood. Linen looked at the doll's status window. Blood Puppet. Level 5. Race, Flesh Blood Evil Spirit. Attribute, Chaotic Neutral. Combat capability, you can provoke it a little. Description, in Wandering Soul Valley, a puppet appears, searching for mommy with a doll as her peer. Whoever dares to snatch her favorite dolly will find themselves a new home in its belly. Tears appeared on the girl's face and she plaintively asked to heal her doll. The soul lamp is only reacting slightly. It doesn't look like she is dangerous. Linen opened the door and asked the girl to come inside. She thanked him. Thanks to the soul lamp, no one will be able to enter unless I invite them. Unless they are someone powerful. Linen closed the door, and the girl with the doll walked into the house and sat down at the table. Linen approached her and thought, to be a valuable employee, it is necessary to bring in more business. Besides, the evil spirits and monsters in this place aren't inherently bloodthirsty. After all, they also just want to live their lives. With that said, the condition is to avoid discussing their taboos. The girl broke the silence first and said that the doll's hand was missing. She couldn't find it no matter what she did. The girl said that this is her most favorite doll and if this goes on, the doll will die. Tears flowed from the girl's eyes and her mouth turned into a wide mouth with fangs. The girl looked at Linen hopefully. You can save her, can't you? Linen swallowed nervously and said that he definitely could. A dialogue box appeared. Linen sanity -5. The main character took out a magnifying glass and carefully examined the doll's wound. Dialogue boxes appeared. The wound shows signs of teeth marks, which preliminarily matches the dental characteristics of the patient's family member. The blood found in the family member seems to match with the patient's blood. The preliminary diagnosis is that the patient's family member ate one of the patient's arms. Linen was surprised that the system was helping him with the diagnosis because he didn't expect it. The main character asked the girl a question, have you eaten anything lately? The girl replied that she was very hungry and had not eaten anything for many days. Also, the girl remembered that last night she dreamed that she ate a lot of delicious things, such as meat, hair, ears. All these were her favorite dishes. They were delicious. Both the girl's and doll's faces contorted in pleasure after talking about it. The dialogue box showed that Linen's sanity level was already -10. Linen rubbed his chin thoughtfully and said, if that's the case, I have a suspicion that when you were dreaming, you accidentally ate the doll's arm. The doll crackled and began to repeat how much it loved its mother. Linen asked the girl if she felt any discomfort lately. The girl replied that her stomach felt like it was scratching, as if something was scratching inside. The girl clutched her stomach. Linen sat down at the table and started writing something. He said, then it's likely the case. It seems the arm hasn't been digested yet. What do you prefer, surgery or physical therapy? The girl asked about surgery, how it will be performed. The doll started repeating the word surgery. Linen took out a blade and stuck it into the table next to the doll. He said, it's simple, I'd cut open your abdominal cavity and take this out. The girl got scared and asked what about physical therapy. Linen pulled the knife out of the table and said that this option is much easier. Just get it directly. The price in this case is even cheaper. The girl nervously agreed to this option. Linen replied that there was no problem. In this case, he would take care of everything. He asked the girl, "Do you want me to take it out from the top or the bottom?" The main character put on gloves and approached the girl. He said, "Relax, no matter if it's from the top or bottom, I'm not going to hurt you. Are you ready?" The girl shook with fear, then her face changed to anger. She said, "How about we call it a day for today? I don't want medical treatment anymore." Linen waved his finger and said, "I can't do that. My teacher has told me all customers must be treated once they enter the store. Otherwise they will have to leave something behind." The girl shook and agreed. She asked to do it from the top. Linen sat the girl down on a special chair and asked her to open her mouth wide. The girl opened her widest mouth with fangs and the main character turned away a little in disgust because of the smell. Linen took the ring from the table and put it in the girl's mouth, then with all his strength he put his hand in her mouth and tried to get the eaten hand. "Don't move, it will be over soon." He moved his hand in her stomach and several dialogue boxes popped up. "You have received 50 rotten meat. You have received 2 unknown ear. You have received 5 rotten meat. You have received 1 comb." Eventually, he found his hand and took it out, then rinsed it with water. "On Skazel, that night you unknowingly ate your doll's arm. She didn't remind you since you were hungry. In the future, please refrain from eating strange things. You won't be able to digest them easily." He threw his hand on the table in front of the girl and took out a thread and needle and asked, "The cost of stitching will be 30 skull coins. Would you like to proceed with the stitching now?" The girl agreed, but her doll screamed and did not agree with it. Linen said, "Good, help me hold her still. I'm going to stitch it now." The girl agreed and pressed the doll to the table. Linen's eyes lit up and he took off. He stuck a needle in his shoulder and started sewing on his arm. Dialogue boxes appeared. +1 surgical ability experience point. Linen continued to level up his surgery skills and finally finished. He cut off the thread and looked at the doll. The doll lay exhausted. Linen took out the medicine and passed it to the girl. "Apply this medication once a day. She should recover after a week." He poured medicine on the newly stitched wound and the doll screamed while grabbing her hand. Then it jumped on the girl and asked her to leave here as soon as possible. Linen started counting the money for the treatment. Physical therapy was 10, sewing 30, medicine 70. "That will be a total of 110 skull coins. Thank you for your visit. I hope to see you again." The girl pulled the steel circle out of her mouth and then took out the coins. "I only brought 20 coins. Linen picked up the knife that his teacher gave him and said, "That's still 90 coins short. You can use a part of your body as collateral. I can help you cut it for free." Linen waved the knife in front of her face. The girl, frightened, fell from her chair and said that she had 10 more coins. The main character replied that in this case, the girl still lacks 80 coins. The girl said that she would buy medicine next time. Linen replied that in this case, 20 coins are still needed. The girl asked, "Can I do it on credit?" Linen Otvatil, "We're a small business, we can't do it on credit. How about you leave an eyeball behind? That way you can keep the medicine and I will even give you 40 coins as change." The girl clutched her eye and asked if there was anything else she could pay for. Linen asked her to name what she could pay. The girl was embarrassed and offered to pay with her body. Hearing this, the main character was surprised. "You can do that." He was deep in thought. "Can it really be done this way?" Linen looked at the girl again and replied, "I don't accept body payment, I just want your right eye. Don't worry, you can redeem it later when you earn money." The girl began to cry and agreed. The doll tried to dissuade the girl, but the girl had already pulled out her eye and put it in the solution. A dialogue box appeared. "You have obtained a rare item, Blood Doll's Right Eye 1. Carrying this increases hunger by 10. Can use skill, Invincible Stomach. You have completed the quest. You receive quest rewards, Skeleton Coins 50, Surgical Ability Experience 50. Special reward, Blood Doll's Fear +30, Blood Doll's Doll Fear +50. Linen bowed to the girl and said, "Done. I'll welcome you back next time. The Bloodsaw Apothecary sincerely serves you." The girl began to cry and walked towards the exit. A shady shop. "I won't come back again. I want to find Mom." Linen was surprised at how quickly she decided to leave and looked at the dialogue box. "You triggered a hidden quest. Blood Doll finds Mom. Help the Blood Doll find her mother. Quest completion reward, Blood Doll's Affection +200. Blood Doll's Doll Affection +100. Special reward, +1. Current quest completion, 2%. Linen thought deeply and looked at the tray. On the tray were Unknown Woman's Hair 50, Unknown Woman's Ears 2, Unknown Woman's Comb X1. Linen thought about it. If I'm not mistaken, the little girl has done even more terrifying things. Oh well, I'll talk to her next time she comes. Speaking of quest rewards, I've accumulated quite a few skeleton coins. This stuff is the world's basic currency, usable as general equivalent goods. Linen put the coins in his tongue purse. It's a pity I haven't stepped out of this shop in the past 2 years, no chance to use it. Money isn't a problem, there'll be opportunities to use it in the future. Suddenly, a giant pig appeared in front of him, towering over the guy. One of his eyes was missing. He was wearing a bloodstained apron. He was looking down at Linen with a frenzied gaze. Level 21, Race, Aberration, Attribute, Lawful Evil, Combat Ability, as long as you're willing to be eaten. Description: owner of the Ghost Lane Pork Shop. He's your friendly neighbor and is very willing to share with you the game she just slaughtered, or share you with others. Lens favorability -5. In one eye of the pig, the silhouette of a rat was displayed. In the hero's hand was a lighted lamp. Linen smiled and said to him, "Hello, welcome to the Bloodsaw Apothecary. How may I assist you?" In the demon's hand was a huge, bloody blade. Because he's protected by the soul lamp, ordinary wandering spirits wouldn't dare lay a finger on him, and even if they did, he can suppress them using the power of the soul lamp. But there are also those extremely evil guys. For them, in this world, rules don't really exist. The demon strode inside, holding the eye that had been knocked out. He started to get angry, saying that the old woman had knocked out one of his eyes because of some nonsense, and the next time he met her, it would be different. Pig walked in and sat down, looking back at Linen. He asked the hero where his boss was, and that he would go out and sell him a new eye. He would exchange it for a good catch from the hunt. Linen calmly replied that the teacher was away and he would help him with it. A red sign appeared with the description, "Task from Pighead Demon. Help the fat man find a suitable eyeball. His reward, +50 skeletal coins, +50 healing experience, +20 demon blessings, +1 special reward." Pig frowned and looked at him, asking again. A red sign flashed, indicating that the chance of danger had risen to 89%. They looked at each other in silence. Pig still agreed, saying that in this case he should do it. Linen agreed. Fortunately, he didn't lie about the teacher's departure. Otherwise, if he suspected a lie, he would definitely attack. Linen stood with his back to the demon, holding a flask of red liquid and eyes in it. Several such flasks were placed in front of him. He said they had human eyes, pig eyes, death eyes, bat eyes, and blood doll eyes, prices varying from eye to eye, and what he wanted out of it. Pig stood in front of him, his tongue hanging out of his mouth. He replied that his eye would do just fine. Linen pointed a finger at himself, asking again. Another red sign appeared with a description, Health Linen -10, and the chance of danger increased to 91%. Pig pointed an affirmative finger at him, saying, "Yes, why don't you sell it?" Linen silently averted his gaze to the side, raising his hand to his face. He dug his fingers into his eye socket as Pig stared open-mouthed at him. He tore out his eye. A red sign that read, "Jin, communication with the host's body is lost. Ding, the organ is missing." On Linen's arm was his own eye, which he had just torn out. He said that it will cost 200 skeleton coins, and if the eye fits him, then in this case there will be no refund. Pig was indignant, saying that this can't be, it's impossible. The demon's health is -20. He remembered how the old woman had removed his eye. When she did this, he was in unbearable pain, and Linen, an ordinary person, pulled out his eye without changing his face. A sign appeared, "Ding, the chance of danger has dropped to 50%. Linen stood in front of him with an eye in his hands. The pig continued to stare back with shock on its face. He decided that Linen couldn't be human, and the shopkeeper turned him into a monster. Pig looked away, saying that he didn't need his eye, he needed his own, and unfortunately they didn't have one. The chance of danger has dropped to 45%. Linen put his eye to the bloody eye socket, putting it back in place. He looked at the pig carefully, scratching the back of his head. He knew which eye he would choose for him. The demon was surprised by his words, exclaiming. Linen held out an open palm in front of him, on which lay an eyeball the color of a pig's eye. He asked if it was the same eye. Pig wondered where it came from. He was looking down at the eye in the palm of his hand. Linen stretched out his lips in a small smile, putting his hand to his injured eye. This morning he met a kind grandmother who decided to give him such a toy. He dropped his eye to the table. Pig stared at him, dumbfounded. This scavenger was a real monster that could easily have taken his head off, so she had actually given his eye to an ordinary apprentice. The demon's health dropped by another -30. Linen chuckled. There was a notification that the chance of danger has decreased to 20%. Pig asked, how could he offer an eye to him when the old woman gave it to Linen? The apothecary replied that she did not give it away, but sold it. Its price was 200 skeleton coins. The young man pointedly bent 3 fingers on his hand, showing the pig the number 2. The demon reasoned to himself that Linen, apparently, was not afraid of the old woman's anger at all, and with these thoughts he agreed to buy back his own eye. He pulled out the bag, spilling a few gold coins onto the table. With a clang, they fell in front of Linen. The chance of danger has dropped to 10%. Linen smiled slightly as he adjusted his gloves. He told the demon that this would be settled, specifying where he could put his eye back in, here or on the operating table. Pig frowned a little and replied that he should do it here. The demon thought that the guy must have been joking. Who would dare go under the knife of the apothecary from Wandering Soul's Lane? Linen stood in front of Pig and told Tom to keep his head straight and not move. If it hurts, you can shout. Pig let out an indignant cry at his words, answering if he really thought he was afraid of pain. Linen took out a huge sharp knife in front of him, causing the demon to immediately jump up. The apothecary heated the point of the blade over the candle flame. Pig immediately shivered, his bravado gone. He lay down with his head on a small table. Did you really need a knife to insert the eye? Linen pulled out a huge knife, running his fingers through it. He said that his eye was covered with blood clots and small stones. Linen asked if you would let him help him clean it up. He added that this service was absolutely free for Esvin. The demon hesitated, looking at the apothecary in horror and telling him to take his time and wait a minute. The demon's health dropped by -10. Linen walked over to the pig, raised the knife over it, and began to cut open the empty eye socket. Each time, his knife skill increased by +1, notifying him 3 times. Linen exhaled, wiping the sweat from his forehead. He said they were almost done. The apothecary thought to himself that what was strange was that his knife skill had increased, not the experience of performing surgery. Linen smiled coldly as he cupped the torn eye with tweezers. He told Pig that he was going to put his eye back in. The pig lay there and continued to tremble in front of him. Without paying much attention to this, the apothecary calmly continued to tell him not to move, otherwise he might insert it backwards. The pig seemed to be already unconscious. His one eye rolled back in his head and the table frothed from his mouth. Linen remembered that he had forgotten to use anesthesia, and he seemed to have forgotten about it back when he was sewing up the doll. The apothecary spread his hands, looking at the patient in front of him. It didn't matter anyway. Pig suddenly opened his eye, looking at the flask that Linen was holding. It said 502. It seems that the demon found out exactly what Linen was holding. The guy looked down at him, surprised that he hadn't passed out yet, and said that to make him understand, this is a special glue that will hold his eye. It prevents eye loss and, together with special regenerating drops, guarantees 95% success of the operation. The demon pointed an irritated finger at the empty eye socket, telling him to shut up and get down to business, and he couldn't be here anymore. Linen smiled ominously and replied, all right, I'll let you go as soon as possible. He took a cotton swab in one hand and an eyeball in the other, smearing it with glue. He cupped his eyelid with one hand, pushing it as wide as possible, and put the eye to the socket, pushing it inside. With an even more bloodthirsty smile, Linen added that he should trust him because he is a top-level professional. The demon's health dropped by another -20. Linen took a large hammer in his hand. Pig, seeing this, lay wide-eyed and asked him why the apothecary had taken the hammer. Linen lifted him over his head, still holding his open eyelid with his other hand, and told him not to move. This was the final part of the operation. If the hammer breaks, he will have to pay a lot more. He started pounding the pig with the hammer. The apothecary continued to hold him, telling him to be patient, while the demon screamed loudly, its mouth wide open. After finishing pounding the demon with the hammer, Linen told him that everything was ready. The guy immediately noticed that he had set the eye backwards. The pig jumped off, and the newly inserted eye was now squinting to the right. Linen immediately jerked forward, pulling the newly inserted eye back out of its socket. The demon screamed loudly. Linen said that it was just a small medical error, and he is willing to fix everything completely free of charge. The apothecary picked up the hammer again, pounding the demon with it again. Pig screamed in horror, saying that he was very scared, and several times repeated that he could no longer be near him. The demon's health dropped by -20 again, and with the next hit, it dropped another -20. Linen raised the hammer over his head. Pig asked him to stop. The apothecary frowned and clenched his teeth, telling him not to move because he, as a doctor, was responsible for his health. He kept hammering at it non-stop. He must make sure that each of his patients will remain safe and sound. After a while, he finally finished. Pig lay unconscious not far from him, shivering on the floor. Linen was sitting at his desk, filling out a magazine. A notification was displayed that he had completed the task and received a reward, +50 skull coins, +50 healing experience, +1 special Narada. The following tablet spoke of an observation. For some unknown reason, the pig-headed demon's sense of gratitude turned into intense fear during the operation, so it gains the pig-headed demon's fear +50. Linen tapped his index finger on the table, a bundle of pills and a flask of green potion lying next to his hand. He told the demon to take these medicines twice a day, one inside, the other applied on top. Thus, the vision should have been fully restored in 2 days. Linen loomed over Pig with a sinister smile, holding a paper in his hands. He said the total cost was 546 skull coins. If there were no problems, then he needed to sign and leave his handprint on the contract. Pig stared at him in shock, his eyes wide. He couldn't figure it out and repeated after him about the hand. A handprint. Linen told him not to bother and he would help him. He dipped his index finger into the bloody eye socket, smearing the tip of his finger with blood. Pig immediately screamed in pain. The apothecary signed it in its place with a bloody finger. Pig dropped the bag of coins in front of the apothecary. The demon continued to tremble, holding his hand to his bloody eyelid. he asked, still shaking, if he could leave. Apothecary opened the bag, shuffling the coins between them, and replied that of course he could leave. A sign flashed, indicating that he had opened the pig-headed demon's additional quest, another stomach. He was given a reward for completing tasks, plus 50 skeleton coins, plus 50 healing experience, and a visual diagnostic function was opened. He looked at the demon carefully, telling it to wait. Pig immediately froze in place. He was afraid to look back, asking what was happening again. Linen replied that he saw something inside him, noticed another problem, and advised him to stay and run the diagnosis again. The demon stared at him in shock, crying out that he was deceiving him. And the demon doesn't like lying the most. He turned to her. Linen breathed viciously. Linen calmly replied that he was a doctor and couldn't lie to his patients. If he found a problem but didn't say so, it would mean a medical error. The demon stared at him in silence. He agreed anyway, sitting back down and telling him that he would trust him this time, but if he lied to him, he would never forgive him. Linen placed 2 fingers on Pig's arm, saying that he was taking his pulse. During the pulse measurement, a notification was displayed that he had learned the healing experience plus 1 several times, for a total of 3 times. Linen tensed up, and the demon along with him. The apothecary didn't say anything when the demon first became nervous and asked if there really was a problem. Linen replied that the problem wasn't too serious, but it wasn't too simple either. It all depended on how you felt about it. The demon anxiously asked what the problem was. Linen replied that the problem was ectopic. There was a sinister smile on his face. The demon immediately tensed, startled. They both fell silent, looking at each other. The demon flew into a rage, asking, "What does he say? Ectopic pregnancy. Did he really tell him about an ectopic pregnancy? He was actually a man." Linen backed up a bit as he watched the demon become enraged. The apothecary added that he could tell by his pulse, and he was never wrong. He said he would definitely take care of him. Pig continued to yell furiously, grabbing him by the collar and telling him that he was a man and couldn't have a uterus. Linen replied that this was why he said it was an ectopic pregnancy, and the absence of a uterus didn't improve the situation. I needed a major sex reassignment surgery, hormone pills, and more. Pig couldn't listen to him anymore. He told him to stop immediately and shut up. He jumped out of his chair, slamming his palm down on the table. The demon cradled his face in his hands, exhaling heavily. They both fell silent for a moment. Linen was the first to speak up and asked what he was thinking. The demon replied irritably that he had been thinking about how to cut him apart. Linen didn't pay attention and went on, telling him to get this nonsense out of his head and asking if he had recently felt bloating and abdominal pain, dryness and vomiting, loss of appetite, and if there was any bleeding there. Pig was extremely annoyed and again screamed about how he was still feeling sick. How can he have their bleeding? Does he have it? Linen scratched his cheek thoughtfully. He continued his questioning, asking if there were any other symptoms, if he felt anything else. Pig averted his gaze and said that he just had a stomach ache, and had he never eaten junk food himself to ask such a question. Linen furrowed his brows seriously and asked when it started, to which the demon replied that it was a month ago. Linen exclaimed, asking if he really ate something unhealthy every day. The apothecary continued his questioning, asking when he had last mated, whether there were any bad habits in his life, like a lot of experience with different pigs or other creatures. Pig jumped up indignantly, wondering if he would dare ask him again. Saliva was flying out of his mouth due to anger, and Linen only managed to move away from him a little. He decided to drop the question and move on to the next one. Linen smilingly clarified what he felt during the last mating, like the intense pain of breaking up. Pig could no longer stand this mockery, jumping up and saying that he had already endured it all for too long, and that the doctor should explain to him what such a gap is with severe pain. Pig grabbed his shoulders and shook him violently, making Linen's head spin. He went on angrily repeating what kind of break he was talking about in such extreme pain. Linen tried to calm him down a bit, telling him that this was just a treatment process and it was all for his own good. The pig's mouth was steaming with anger. Linen continued and said that he didn't want to end up being seriously ill, right? They were silent for a while and Pig calmed down a little. The demon sat back down at the table, pointing a finger at him and talking about giving him one last chance. He slammed his fist down on the table and told him to get on with it quickly. Linen flinched slightly in surprise. A notification appeared stating that he had received 3 times the pacification experience plus 1. Linen smiled as he leaned forward on the table. He cleared his throat and went on to say that based on what he had said earlier, the conception had occurred in an unconventional way, and most likely he had eaten something that contributed to it. This thing was able to distort its internal structure. Linen flexed his throat slightly as he explained these things to the demon. He pointed a finger at it, saying that this, apparently, led him indirectly to pregnancy. The demon clenched his hand into a fist, asking about indirect conception. Linen went on to clarify that he had been having trouble eating lately. No matter how much he ate, he was still hungry. He asked if the demon often felt hungry. Pig was a little taken aback as he asked how Linen found out about this. The doctor began to list: black circles under his eyes, pale face, cold hands. Linen placed a large basin of water in front of him. All these symptoms, in his opinion, indicate that an evil spirit is parasitizing inside him. In his hand, Linen held a jug that looked like a small chick, with red pupils and a blue color. A purple potion was pouring out of its beak. Linen explained that it was a magic potion. He added it to the pitcher of water. Linen ordered him to dip his hand in it. Linen added that it would help them find out if there was an evil spirit inside it. Pig looked at him incredulously, even though he thought it looked safe enough at first glance. The demon slowly lowered his hand into the jug. Creatures that looked like small spirits began to swirl around him. He felt something. An evil spirit appeared behind him, grinning from ear to ear, its mouth open and sharp teeth sticking out. His eyes glowed red. He felt a stirring in the pit of his stomach. The demon grabbed at it, saying that it was bursting out. Linen immediately grabbed the sledgehammer, swinging it and hitting the demon. Pig immediately flew out from behind the table, flying backwards. Linen threw the sledgehammer aside. Pig lay on the floor with his tongue hanging out of his mouth and his eye rolled back in his head. He asked me what it was. Linen replied that the initial diagnosis was that it was an ectopic pregnancy of a parasitic type, but the fetus inside it was not yet fully formed. But he was lucky enough to meet Linen, according to the doctor's own words. Pig immediately burst into tears, hugging the doctor's legs and saying that his behavior in his direction was initially too aggressive. The demon told him not to take it personally and begged him to have mercy on Linen and help him. Linen pondered, if this was a real essence fight with an evil spirit, then it wasn't a big deal, but an evil spirit was growing inside of him, and was there a way to fight it? Linen speculated about whether he should stop trying or try to fix things. He asked the demon in front of him to remember if he had eaten anything he wasn't used to. Pig immediately nodded, sticking out his index finger, and replied that he had eaten a baby on the street a month ago, but at that time he was eating everything and wasn't full, so he didn't consider it eaten. The demon looked away, tongue hanging out. He continued by saying that he only eats pork and human remains. Linen pondered as he wrote down his words in a notebook. He said that he would have to see what was inside and ordered them to follow him. Pig asked where they were going. Linen replied with a smile on his face that they were going to the operating room, and Pig immediately flinched. A terrifying image of something being cut open with a huge cleaver flashed through his mind. He thought about the blood and asked again if they were really going to go to the bloody operating room. They ended up in the operating room. Pig was lying on the table, stripped down to his pants. Hooks and pitchforks hung from the ceiling above. Linen turned on the light above him, not like a lamp, but like a huge red eye. The demon clarified whether it was really necessary, and whether the diagnosis was 100% correct. Linen took out the tools covered with a cloth. He replied that the only way to know if there was an evil spirit in him or not was to do an autopsy on his stomach. If they find it and cut it down, they can get rid of it. Linen drew a huge sharp knife. Seeing this, Pig again began to resent and say that a little more, and he will cut him. The demon looked around. The carcasses of various creatures were hanging everywhere, suspended by their legs. Somewhere a head was standing nearby. He was instantly horrified. He went on to say that he used to slaughter pigs himself, but now he was under the knife himself. It was a disaster for him. The demon was getting nervous, asking him how long he was going to delay and asking him to get started soon. Linen was standing at the side of his couch. He agreed in response to his request, slashing a knife into a head of water. He held it out in front of him, holding it up and pointing at Pig. Linen asked if he was ready. The demon hesitated at the sight of the knife point. Linen scratched his temple thoughtfully, telling him to wait another minute. The apothecary quickly rushed over and picked up a marker, marking the pig's belly with a cross. With a sinister smile, he raised the knife over the pig. The poor demon was trembling and scared. Linen said it was worth trying again and asked him if he was ready. The demon hesitantly replied that he was ready. Linen pressed the red button, and Pig's hands were bound with iron shackles. He let out a cry of displeasure and told the doctor to be a little more careful. Linen held the knife out in front of him, swiping at the blade and telling the demon not to scream. These handcuffs were for this purpose, so that it does not move and does not interfere with the operation. Pig asked uncertainly if Linen had operated on anyone before him. Linen replied that he had seen his teacher kill a pig, and in his opinion, it was probably something like an operation. So he advised the demon to calm down and be confident in his surgical skills. Linen touched the point of the knife with his finger. The demon immediately screamed and struggled, saying that it wasn't ready and Linen must be joking. Linen was indignant in response and started talking about how he had already sharpened the knife, and he started saying no. He asked if the man was afraid that his belly would grow out and the evil spirit would come out. Linen grabbed him, raising the knife over him. He said they had to do it today. Pig had to do it. He slashed the knife. A notification flashed that he had gained +10 knife experience 3 times each. Pig lay with his eyes rolled back, his tongue hanging out of his mouth. Suddenly, he screamed. He turned to the doctor. Lin was holding an incomprehensible fleshy clot that was oozing an incomprehensible purple smoke. The doctor congratulated him and said that the operation was successful. The father and daughter were safe. A sign with a description of the creature was displayed. It was a soulless blood infant. Race, evil spirit. Feature, unpredictable actions. Level 1. Description, evil spirit infant, created from resentment and ghost spirit energy, which was formed by absorbing a large amount of animal energy. Once fully formed, the infant's spirit would devour the host's soul, flesh, and blood, and the pighead's soul would turn into a true evil. Pig looked down at the cruciform wound on his stomach. He told Lin to sew it up immediately. Lin replied that it was certainly not the best time to talk about it, but he should have warned him that the transaction cost was 300 coins. But since it was his first time doing it, he would give a 20% discount, making the total price 240. The demon ignored him, bursting into tears and only telling him to sew her up as soon as possible. Lin replied that, of course, he would sew it up, but he would have to pay another 40 coins. He could sew up the wound with hemp thread, wool thread, cotton thread, steel wire. Lin picked up a needle and thread. He asked what the demon would choose in the end. Pig looked back at him and said it was hemp thread. He started yelling again and telling Lin to sew up the wound as soon as possible. Lin began to thread the needle carefully. He told him to calm down a bit and let him get started soon. Lin started to sew up the wound on the pig's stomach, tying a knot with a bow. A notification flashed 3 times, indicating that the sewing skill experience had increased by +1. Lin told him that everything was ready, taking out a spray can with something incomprehensible inside and spraying the pig's wound with something light green in color. Pig stared at his stitched stomach. Lin said with a smile on his face that the operation was successful. A sign appeared that said Lin had completed an additional task, and here was his reward: +50 skeletal coins, +50 surgical experience, +50 new experience. He also received +200 pig-headed demon fear, and his popularity in Wandering Souls Lane increased by 10% higher. Lin pointed at the sinister baby and added that Pig's daughter was also fine, although it was an evil spirit, but if he tried to raise it. Pig didn't wait to hear what Lin was going to say, but immediately ran away, scattering a lot of gold coins in his wake. Lin shouted after him that he had forgotten his daughter, but Pig had already run away, saying that he didn't need it and he could take it for himself, and all the money was also his. Lin, with the creature in his arms, tried to catch up with the pig and replied that he was just an apothecary and does not deal with children, and the demon could not just leave the one he gave birth to. Lin added that he promised to give him anesthesia next time and let him still pick up his daughter. Pig, however, was not particularly interested and hurried away. Lin looked at the creature in his arms and wondered what he should do now. He said that, unfortunately, he could leave her here, but only temporarily. When the teacher returns, he will chop it into pieces and eat it along with the wine. The baby seemed to understand perfectly what he had just been told. Lin put his hands in the drops, burying his eye. 3 times increased health recovery +1. It hissed a little, but Lin was glad that it didn't get into his eyes, otherwise he would have had serious vision problems. The pig's daughter was crawling from below him, looking like a strange round creature with sharp teeth. It was reported that his skills had significantly improved, and his authority on Wandering Souls allies was growing with each completed task. Lin, level 3, race, human, human strength, 4, agility, 5, intelligence, 8, stamina, 4, special points, 4, basic skills, housework proficiency, 909 1000th, healing, 90 100th, basic surgical ability 203 1000th, basic knife proficiency 26 100th, primary defense ability diagnosis 55 100th, skull coins, 250, popularity, level 15, description, many benefactors felt pity and sympathy for the student of the owner of the pharmacy Bloodsaw Pharmacy. But it seems that this sickly at first glance boy was completely embittered and adopted the perverted methods of treatment of his teacher. Lin asked what the last sentence meant, angry. He is so kind and responsible to his patients, and they say that his methods are perverted. There was nothing objective or fair in those words. He had 4 more special points. He could spend it on improving his physical condition, because if you want to survive in such a chaotic world and continue working as a doctor, then your body must be strong enough. Suddenly, Linen's body was enveloped in green light and he rose up in the air. Not bad, Linen remarked, his body actually getting stronger. He lifted up his shirt, poking at the abs with his finger. He looked back at the demon baby and the purple creature that was biting him and apparently trying to eat him. He took the baby in his arms, almost forgetting about her. What was he supposed to do with it? A sign came out with information about the baby, on which it was written that he was already level 2. Only recently, it was at the initial level of development, and now it has already risen to the 2nd level. Linen has an additional task. The baby's ghost spirit is disturbed due to being born early, so its appearance and internal appearance are distorted, but the more fear it gets, the faster the baby will have the strength to complete development. 1 additional task percent, create magic oil for the soul lamp, task reward, plus 2 days of using the lamp, 2 additional task, feed the baby in the backyard, task reward, plus 50 baby favors, 3 additional tasks, silence the reagents and save them to your sample collection, task reward, experience sample making plus 10, 4 additional tasks, wait for the pig-headed demon to come and collect his daughter, reward, analysis is underway. Lennon couldn't believe that there was such a variety of quests, but the first 3 tasks seemed too difficult for him. He would have chosen the 4th first, but the reward for it is still uncertain, but what was meant by the fact that the reward analysis was still going on. Lennon leaned back in his chair with a smile, holding the baby close. He thought that this must be a very generous reward. After all, the choice that he had just made showed all his responsibility. Suddenly, it was revealed that his virtue had increased by plus 10. When he saw this, he slapped his forehead and remembered that he had completely forgotten to feed the baby. He put the baby in a jar, telling him to stay here and behave while Lennon went about his business. The baby just stared out of the jar as Lennon left. The apothecary stepped outside, many pairs of eyes staring back at him from the darkness, but he didn't care at all. He opened the lid of the cellar outside the building, thinking that if the system hadn't reminded him of the baby, he would have completely forgotten about it. Lennon opened the lid of the basement, looking down carefully. Lennon filled the garden bed with green liquid. A window appeared, informing him that he had received 10 skull coins, the kid's favor was minus 10, and the hatch was open plus 1. Lennon didn't fully understand what kind of child it was. During his 2 years here, the teacher had never told him anything about children like this. But it is better not to ask the teacher anything, otherwise he could become food for this very baby. Lennon was about to leave when a creature appeared in front of him, blocking the way. Lennon was slightly taken aback. It was something ugly, like a potato, with tentacles and an open mouth. Lennon's health has dropped by minus 10. It seems that the system is indeed right. If left as it is, this blood baby will become more and more distorted in its true appearance. The huge creature in front of him opened its mouth. Lennon's health dropped by another minus 30. If he didn't do something, Pig wouldn't recognize his daughter. He would be the first person who couldn't stand being around her for even a minute. It was getting uglier and uglier. Lennon grabbed the creature and tied it to the bed. He came up with a great idea. Deciding to just leave it out, he decided to get her a plastic surgery on her face. Otherwise, it will make everything on the street look ugly. Lennon put his hand to his face, smiling. He examined her tentacles. He jabbed a finger at them, telling them that he was telling the truth and that it would be better if she didn't move. The kid's sense of fear increased by plus 10. Lennon examined her. The first step was completed, and the next step was to fix the face. The baby's sense of fear increased by another plus 10. He fixed her face. Lennon heard a knock on the door, and when he opened it, he saw a corpse wrapped in bandages. His eyes were burning and his mouth was wide open. Behind him, many more eyes shone. Lennon greeted him, telling him welcome to the Bloodsaw Pharmacy. It was a flaming ghost, race, spirit of death, level, 15, feature, acts chaotically, combat capability, medium, description, it's an evil spirit burned alive in a fire. His body is 99.9% covered in burns, and his personality has been distorted and clouded. There is nothing good or good about this spirit. The spirit roared, telling Lennon that it wanted to change its face. There was a new task, help the flaming ghost change his face, task reward, plus 50 skull coins, surgical experience plus 50, special reward plus 1. Lennon pointed and invited him to go inside, saying that his operation was not finished yet, and it was necessary to wait a couple of minutes. Surprisingly, this ghost also needs plastic surgery. Why wouldn't Lennon help him? The spirit will be able to see his excellent surgical skills. The ghost said nothing, but looked at the doctor questioningly. Lennon told him not to worry, even though he had no experience in plastic surgery, but he was very good at clay sculpting. Lennon stood over the monstrous baby. He showed that, for example, kneading clay for figurines is not the same as kneading dough. Clay is more rigid and durable. It is not too dry and not very wet. Kneading clay is a good test of hand endurance. The baby's sense of fear increased by plus 10. The ghost stared at him in silence, its mouth even wider than usual. Lennon stretched, stirred, tore and threw and did nepoimi that with the baby. The spirit stared at them. Flaming Ghost's health dropped by minus 20. Lennon continued to crumple the baby's face. The spirit asked what was going on here, and that nothing in this store inspired confidence. Lennon kept kneading the baby's face. Flaming Ghost's mental state dropped by minus 20. The ghost, with its mouth open, tried to speak again to Lennon. He was obviously terrified by what he saw in front of him. Lennon said that this baby is so ugly that he is going to replace its face with a normal one. He just had to do it. The spirit walked over to the couch, watching Lennon crumple her face like dough. He said that his method of work is really amazing. The spirit was horrified, having understood that he would be treated like this, too. How terrifying. He thought for a moment that he had entered a black magic shop. The spirit began to panic. Linen apologized, saying that he seemed to have pushed too hard. The spirit howled in its thoughts, talking about how its face had literally exploded, just that it had literally crushed its face with its bare hands. Linen continued to crumple the baby like clay. The flaming ghost's fear level increased by 20 and then by another plus 20. Linen exhaled. He said that he would go get some tools for now, but he could wait a bit until Linen returned. The ghost was horrified at the sight of the doctor, and especially at the sight of his grin, for it was a very scary person. Flaming Ghost's mental state dropped by minus 20 twice. The spirit clutched its head, horrified at where it had landed. He only dared to come here for treatment because the crazy owner had left. But who knew that he was being replaced by another madman? Looking down at the baby's mess, the spirit said maybe another time. He wasn't sure that he wouldn't suffer the same fate as this ghost. He heard Linen and the sound of a chainsaw. He thought about why he needed a chainsaw for plastic surgery. The ghost turned at the sound coming from the darkness. His red eyes widened. His mental state dropped by minus 20 twice again. He was horrified to see someone wearing a mask and wielding a chainsaw charging straight at him. Flaming Ghost's mental state dropped another minus 40. He looked at Linen. The doctor didn't understand what had happened to him. Linen stood with a knife in his hand. He apologized for waiting. The spirit screamed in terror, clutching its head. Flaming Ghost's mental state continued to plummet, first by minus 20, then by minus 30, then by minus 40. He screamed and cursed at the store, still yelling for help. The spirit sped away from Linen. He picked up the knife, not understanding what was going on here, because he just went to sharpen the knife and did not understand why the spirit was already leaving. A sign flashed. Flaming Ghost mission failed. Flaming Ghost has plus 400 fear of him. This was his first client to reach the level of extremely scared. Reward plus 100 skull coins. Popularity increased by 10%. Linen was indignant, not understanding how they dared to say that he was extremely scared. He hadn't done anything to scare him. He was polite and smiled sweetly. Shouldn't a spirit be extremely happy instead? Linen decided to ignore it for now. He needed to deal with the baby first. After a while, Linen finished with the ghost's plastic surgery. She looked much better now. In front of him was a beautiful human-looking girl, small, with blonde hair and blue hair. Linen was the best in his class in modeling and drawing before moving to another world. But before, he never thought that it would be useful to him somewhere. Linen noticed that a third red eye appeared on the girl's forehead. He staggered back. Something spurted out of his eye. Linen said that the forehead was not a place for the eyes. He had worked so hard to sculpt her face, so he had to take care of it and not let anyone spoil it, otherwise there would be no need to blame him for the next operation later. The girl's eyes filled with tears. A sign with the information flashed, fear of the bloody baby plus 50, and then again plus 50. The system found that the baby's fear of him increased rapidly, which slowed the process of incorrect development of the spirit to equals 321%, and it continued to decline. His reward, plus 151 skull coins, plus 100 experience in plastic surgery. Special reward, offended spirit's hair plus 5. So he could complete quests that the system didn't even mention. Apparently, there is still a lot of unknown things in it. Linen decided that he would try to study it thoroughly soon. The girl was standing next to him not far away, shedding tears. The strands of hair Linen obtained might be good for self-defense, but there were only 5 of them, so it was necessary to store them for serious combat. Linen had a few strands in his hand. Offended spirit hair, baby ghost's hair contains extreme discontent. If the enemy attacks you, they will get tangled in the strands and suffocate to death. The little girl waved happily at him, and a tentacle extended from her back, following her hand. As soon as Linen turned in her direction, she immediately hid it, pretending that nothing had happened. Linen looked at the girl with a puzzled expression and asked himself if he had just imagined it or not. The doctor stared at the open door and the hundreds of glowing eyes in front of him. It was almost midnight, and it was time to close the store. He went to the door. To distinguish between day and night in a dark world, you need to look at the light from the lamp of the soul. Closer to midnight, the light dims, and in the daytime, it burns brightly. Linen raised the lamp up, and the eyes from the darkness followed him up. Consider it night, the lamp was barely lit. He looked in front of him, seeing Silhouette in a red cape. This is the time when every monster is in an excited state, and if you do not hide in the walls of the store, it can attack. Linen stared at the stranger in front of him. In a bad case, it will simply be torn apart. A sign appeared with the description, Demon Hunter, race, human, level, combat ability, kills quietly and without witnesses, acts chaotic. Description, a person who found himself in the dark world, does not belong to any organization, is mysterious and very scary. He has spent his entire life hunting monsters, which he considers to be true evil. Please don't try to understand it, it can be very dangerous. Linen was surprised. He wondered if the person in front of him was really a human. It was the first time he had met a person here in these 2 years, especially such a strong one. He was incredibly powerful. A light flashed next to Lin En's face. The man spoke up, saying that he urgently needed treatment, a battle potion and a strength-restoring potion. The face peeked out slightly from under the hood, revealing a light stubble and an aged face. The dangerous task has appeared. Heal a wounded demon hunter, reward, plus 500 skull coins, plus 50 demon hunter favor. The penalty for not completing the mission was death at the hands of a demon hunter. Lin En smiled slightly, inviting him in. He told him to come through. They were almost closed, and he was here right now. The hunter sat down at the table and placed the file in front of him. He said he thought the alley was crawling with dangerous monsters. He didn't expect to encounter a creature of his own race in this world. He grinned slightly and narrowed his eyes. The hunter asked Lin En how he was still alive. A notification flashed that he had started an interracial connection, and the penalty for failure to complete the task was erased. Lin En replied with a smile and said that he was also very happy to meet him. The doctor asked him what injury he needed to treat. The hunter picked up his file, pouring its contents into his mouth. Fortunately for Lin En, they were of the same race. If it had been a monster, the hunter would have easily cut it down. Suddenly, the man stood in front of the doctor. He took off his clothes and hat. He was a white-haired man, well-built, with bandages wrapped around his arms. He slammed his fist down on the table. A sign showed that the patient's preliminary diagnostic stage had been completed, and that his right shoulder had been affected by the poison of the black butterfly. The poison had already penetrated the patient's bones, so the situation was extremely dangerous. The hunter was standing in front of Lin En, black smoke oozing out of his right shoulder, and his body was shrouded in something purple. Lin En asked him again if it was really a black butterfly. The hunter was surprised that he knew about her and added that at first he underestimated the doctor. He continued his story, sharing that he had almost been killed by a red-robed evil spirit with this disgusting poison earlier. The man smiled and added that it was a good thing that his body would quickly get in good shape after the treatment, and he would definitely not miss it next time. Lin En agreed with him and said that he would definitely cure him. From the look in his eyes, he knew that he would definitely kill him if the doctor didn't treat him. Lin En covered his mouth to avoid being overheard and asked the system what the black butterfly was. A sign flashed up with the description that the black butterfly is a non-uniform body in the dark world that is completely imbued with resentment and the aura of death. For the victim's body, it is destructive and aggressive in relation to other processes in the body. If an ordinary creature is infected with the black butterfly's poison, the victim's entire body will turn into pus for a period of time. The initial treatment required scraping the dead skin off the bone. Lin En frowned as he looked at the tools. He told the hunter that he needed to perform surgery on the outside of his arms first. The hunter wasn't too happy about this, holding out his hand and asking if he had the skills to do it. Lin En took a cleaver in one hand, a giant knife in the other, and told him not to worry, he would definitely have enough experience for this. Although he had only performed 2 surgeries, his last patient had praised his skills. The hunter grimaced a little and asked, how come just twice? He didn't like it very much and asked if there were any other pharmacies nearby. Lin En replied that no, there didn't seem to be any other pharmacies, and even if there were, his teacher would probably have dealt with them. The hunter's eyes widened in surprise. Lin En continued with a smile that teacher wouldn't allow another pharmacy to exist here. The man in front of him visibly stiffened. Despite this, he decided to trust and ordered Tom to operate on him. Lin En stood behind him and was happy to point out that in this case, he would start the operation. The man was sitting at the table and thought that he must have misunderstood something. This place didn't look like a pharmacy at all. Dangerous tools were everywhere, and there were bottles of something incomprehensible on the table. The house smelled more like a butcher shop than a drugstore. In addition, Lin En evoked fear rather than calmness. The hunter's health dropped by -1. Lin En asked the man with a smile if he would need anesthesia, but he told the doctor that it could only affect his reflexes, and real men don't need anesthesia. Lin En plunged the knife into his shoulder without further ado. He said it was not very good, because he had never given anesthesia to a person. The hunter looked around a little fearfully, asking if this was going to be the case. Lin En started to deny it, saying that he was just trying out the knife first and whether it hurt the man. The hunter frowned slightly, saying that it was okay and he could continue. What he kept in mind, however, was that it hurt like hell, but this guy wouldn't dare screw up. After all, offending the demon hunters meant only one thing. Lin En continued to dig the knife into his shoulder, and the man writhed, immediately dropping his file with something in his hands and taking a sip on the table. He was indignant, looking at Lin En and asking what the hell he was doing. Lin En replied with a smile on his face that it was necessary to find a suitable tool size, and let those 2 be used as a backup option for now. 2 knives were already protruding from the hunter's shoulder. The hunter was furiously indignant that he dared to stick some spare pieces of iron into him, and why he did it in the first place. Lin En pulled out his tools, telling him not to worry, it was just an equipment test. After all, he should have realized that the wrong tool could harm him during the operation. Judging by the man's startled expression, he didn't really understand it. Linen continued that in any case, the part of the hand that holds the knives will still be cut out, so he can not worry at all. He, as a doctor, must make sure that the knives fit well to his meat. The dumbfounded man didn't say anything. On the contrary, he thought that his words made sense, and this doctor is a real professional. But were such manipulations really necessary? Why did he feel like he was deceiving him? The veins on the hunter's face bulged. The hunter told the guy to get to work right away, otherwise if he flitted around, he would shoot him right on the spot. The man reached with his free hand for his gun holster. Linen waved him off and told him not to be so nervous. Linen put all the tools in a red-hot bucket. Perplexed, the hunter asked him what he was going to do. The hunter's health dropped by -1. Linen replied that this is the way he disinfects, otherwise the poison of the black butterfly is very aggressive and can lead to poisoning. To prevent the poison from entering the rest of the tissue when cutting out the dead part, the poison from the tools had to be destroyed with fire. The guy continued to heat up the sharp blades in the fire. The hunter hesitated, saying that he knew all this, but the way he did it. He clarified once again whether he actually performed the operation at least once. Linen replied that of course, in the old days, they used to cut off the hair of pigs in this way and cut off the remains with a red-hot knife. The image of the dead piggy immediately appeared in the man's mind. He asked again, clarifying. Linen ignored him, saying that he was ready to start the operation. He might be in a bit of pain from now on, so he had to be patient. Linen placed a tool tray in front of him. The man was slightly taken aback, saying that of course he could put up with such methods, but it was hardly like disinfection, and why was it starting to look like cooking? Linen smiled and told him not to worry. He put on a kitchen apron just in case, so that the poisoned blood wouldn't harm him. And the dinner plates were used to store his severed flesh, so that it could then be used to make a means to increase muscle growth in accordance with the lost one. The hunter's mind raced, and he reflected that if there had been another pharmacy nearby, he would never have set foot in this place. He urged Linen to start operating as soon as possible. Linen looked at him bloodthirstily as he prepared to proceed. Linen heated a skewer over the fire. A notification flashed that he had received 3 times plus 1 surgical experience. There were bloody pieces of meat on the tray. The hunter tried to hold on as best he could, but tears were streaming from his eyes and snot was running out of his nose. Inwardly, he thought about how it hurt like hell, hurt to death, the pain of cuts, the pain of burns, and even the pain of hitting his head couldn't compare to this. Linen continued to apply heated tools to the hunter. The pain was diverse in sensation, layered like meat on bone. Linen said that if he was in pain, it wasn't too late to get an anesthetic. The man's face twisted in pain, and he told Linen to go away, saying that he wasn't in the least bit of pain, even though there were tears running down his eyes. Linen grinned as he pointed at the man's hand and said that maybe he would relax his hand a bit, because this table was made of antique wood, very expensive. The man looked back at his hand, scratching at the table. He blushed a little. The hunter replied that he just liked to scratch wood. What's the big deal? He will pay for this in double the amount. The man began to urge him on and tell him to continue his work, otherwise he would cut off his hand if he didn't shut up. Linen replied with a smile that he was just waiting for him to say a few words before continuing. The doctor grabbed him by the shoulder, raising the blade above him. The hunter tried to slow him down a bit, but Linen slashed at the man's arm. Pieces of dead flesh flew. The man howled in pain. He started yelling and begging him to stop immediately. With his free hand, he began to pound on the table. Linen asked why he was creating so many problems, because he was not satisfied with either fast or slow work, and he also did not want to use anesthesia. He had already done half the work, and he wanted Linen to stop. And why did he have so many demands? The hunter was indignant, asking what kind of operation he thought it was, and began to threaten that he would immediately be crushed and cut thin and even, like noodles. Linen spoke to him again, and the man told him to stop messing around and cut everything out at once. Linen replied, "How could it be possible to cut out everything at once? What is a one-time deal?" The hunter didn't understand what kind of one-time deal he was talking about, so he asked him again. Linen replied that what he was trying to say was that it wouldn't take long to work with the knife, but if he didn't stop moving, he would hit his aorta and be finished. He is a doctor, and for him his patients are his children. He will never allow them to die because of his treatment. Linen stabbed the knife into the table right in front of the man's face. He leaned over him, continuing to tell him that of course he understood that he was in a lot of pain, and so they could still go back to the anesthesia option. The man remained stubborn and insisted that he continue to cut and do his job. He added that he would never set foot in this store again, banging his fist on the table. Linen smiled, stroking the blade and telling him not to worry, because after the operation, he would also be grateful for his knife. After a while, the man was lying on the table, eyes wide and shedding tears. His mouth was open, and his whole face was a grimace of horror. Across from him was a tray of carved dead meat. His head spun, and he thought he saw the devil standing next to him, stabbing knives into his shoulder every now and then. The devil handed him a plate of his own meat, offering him a taste. The hunter's head spun and he passed out completely, falling asleep on the table. Linen stood behind him and poured something into his mouth in a blue bottle that had a 75% degree on it. He spat on his shoulder with the contents of his mouth, and Linen brought the man to his senses. The doctor said that the cleaning was finished. The hunter stared in horror at the man behind him. He asked him to stop, which was enough for him. He wanted to get out of here as soon as possible. Getting up from his chair, the hunter shivered, hunched over, trying to get out of here as quickly as possible. Linen stopped him. They still have one very important step to complete. The hunter was clearly not happy with the idea, asking what the next step was. Linen replied that this was a special step and the patient could relax a little. He pointed somewhere with his hand, asking if the sight before him was not beautiful. There was a tattoo of a small heart on the hunter's torn shoulder. A notification was displayed that the hunter's mental state had decreased by -20. The hunter didn't particularly like Linen's art. He asked me what it was and what he had done with it. The doctor replied with a smile that he thought it was even better and he should have been relieved. The hunter howled, "What other relief?" He was ready to jump on him and finish him off. The man reached for the gun and pointed it at him, but Linen put the knife out in time and pointed it directly at the muzzle. Linen said that he was trying to save him and was doing everything he could to keep him from dying. The doctor said he thought he was acting too cranky. Even if he wanted to kill him, he would have to wait until he was done. He won't let his patient give up halfway. The man stared at him in disbelief. He replied that if he was led by the nose, he would not be able to answer for himself. The hunter fired at the ceiling. He demanded to get down to business right away and finish the operation. Something that looked like a worm landed on the man's head. Linen handcuffed the hunter. The man asked why he tied him up and didn't he want to continue the operation. Linen was standing at his side with a knife. That wasn't the point. Linen was afraid that he wouldn't be able to resist the pain later, so he would raise his hand and shoot him. It didn't matter if he died himself, but if the operation didn't continue, it would be the biggest failure of his life, so to prevent that, he tied him up. The hunter said that if he was afraid of pain, he would have killed him right now, so there was no need for him to do this. Linen put a knife to the injured area. He started to run the sharp blade across the wound, and the man immediately howled. He didn't understand why it felt like he was being hit 1,000 times a second with an uppercut. The doctor replied that he was just scraping the skin. The hunter's fear of Linen increased by +10 twofold, and his knife proficiency increased by +2 twofold. Linen asked him to be patient for a while the man howled in pain. He started demanding anesthesia, saying that he couldn't take it anymore, but Linen refused, saying that his body wouldn't accept the anesthesia anymore, it was too late. The man broke free of the shackles, pointing a gun at him. He didn't believe a word of it anymore. However, Linen intercepted the hand with the gun, knocking it out of his hands. He put a gun to the hunter's mouth and asked him to let him try again, and if he didn't cooperate with him, he would kill him with one shot.